G'day. Just quickly lock my wife's computer up. G'day. Welcome to PowerShell 101 Live. On this really hot Brisbane day. It's going to be hot today. I definitely know it. It's going to be a lot of fun. I'm just going to do a quick stream check, make sure I'm today. Yep, we're good. Sweet. So yeah. Hang on. Oh, I just got a reminder to pay my phone bill today, so should probably get around to doing that. But anyway, welcome to PowerShell101 Live. Today, basically, as the title says, we're just going to be looking some tips and tricks and getting around PowerShell and just kind of little things that I found that really kind of helped me transition, for example, from batch scripting into PowerShell or from VB script into PowerShell, things like that. So definitely that's what we're going to be doing today. It's going to be there's a little bit of content in there. We're also going to be doing some scripting. So there's going to be the second scripting scenario that we're going to be looking at. So a lot of really cool things today. Yeah, I'm just kind of like, that is incorrect. It's PowerShell. So a bit of a lesson plan today. Just quickly jump in there. So essentially, we're just going to be getting around with PowerShell. Also, we're just going to have a quick recap from what we did previously. Just obviously just going to be focusing on the nitty gritty bits and pieces. So again, quality operators, those kinds of things. The more we use it, the easier it's going to become for you guys to articulate what we're talking about. Obviously a bit of a obviously getting around with PowerShell, and then we're going to have a quick intermission for 5 minutes so everyone can kind of stretch their legs. It is a 2-hour session, so everyone can have a bit of a break, stretch their legs, grab a drink, do what they need to do, toilet break, and then we're basically just going to go into PowerShell scripting part 3. Actually, it's not part 2, it's part 3, which is basically our second scenario. So that scenario will be essentially, we're just going to be creating some VMs within Client Hyper-V and doing some bits and pieces with that. So I'm going to be struggling along with that. I haven't really done much with Client Hyper-V. I do have a script that I have lying around, but it's fairly average. So it's definitely going to be using these tips and tricks, and you're going to be seeing these tips and tricks in action with me kind of working out how I'm going to actually write the script and all those kinds of bits and pieces. So that's pretty much going to be the lesson plan for today. Some homework. So the scenario that we're going to be covering today is actually going to probably focus on the first part. I'm just going to quickly switch the screen. It's going to be focusing on that first part. So we're just going to be building that VM. I wonder if I can, is that laser pointer? Oh, I do have a laser. So I'll be focusing on building that VM today. You guys can obviously install Windows 10s and things like that. That can be something you guys can focus on. But essentially today we're going to kind of cover the first step in this specific piece. So without any further ado, let's do a quick recap and we'll go from there. So we talked about it before. We're going to talk about it again. Equality operators. Obviously, the more we talk about it, the easier it is going to be to articulate. So obviously we have our equals operators, our not equals operators. I'm not really gonna I think I've covered enough that basically PowerShell is case insensitive by default. So it just needs to be, you guys, if you want to have any more information from that, you can just go to the previous streams in the YouTube channel. I think I covered it in lesson plan number 2. But anyway, so obviously greater than 2 is greater than 1, less than, I'm just going to clear all this up. So essentially it's just, any sort of operator that you have within, whether it's VB script or whether it's, any sort of other language. Generally it's, an actual equals, or, something along these lines. JavaScript, might have 3 equals, or, double equals and a not, things like that. Essentially, is you can kind of just simplify it down to a hyphen and a hyphen value. So it's not an actual character. It's basically an actual, as a more of a wordy way of saying it. So essentially EQ equals. it makes it much easier to understand and articulate, so you guys don't have to kind of work out, oh, is this greater than, is this less than, you know, those kinds of things. So essentially it just helps with that. Obviously greater than or equal to, 2 is greater than or equal to 1, less than or equal to 1 is less than or equal to 2. This also applies if we get rid of that to change that to 2. This also applies if we change that to 2. So essentially 2 is greater than equal to 2, that's going to evaluate to true, and 2 is going to be less equal to 2, which is going to evaluate to be true. So that's just a couple little pointers there. Where object, can't emphasize this one enough. Where object's one of the big ones that a lot of people use. Essentially allows you to filter input from the pipeline. So you're really basically just filtering based on your where object expression. Again, if you want to see examples like that, you can jump into previous streams, but essentially it's just, this is an expression, so this is any sort of conditional expression. So if you have, think of it as you're just writing an if statement, but for multiple variables. Also, obviously, you don't have to go down that line. You can do this. So you can obviously do, you know, property and condition of values. So like property dot, we'll just go dollar. So dollar. Actually, no, sorry, that's not right. We can go like property could be name. The property name could be name, and the condition could be equals, and then it could be 1, something along those lines. So essentially, it's just simplifying. You don't actually have to pass an expression. You can just do it this way. Obviously, one of the benefits of having an expression is it allows you to nest your where object, so you can actually have a single where object with a single expression versus having multiple where objects. So, you know, piping where object, where object, where object, which is not as efficient. So essentially, this is obviously a cleaner way in terms of performance to do it. Where if you wanted to do this and you wanted to match on multiple conditions, you'd be where object, where object. It also means you can't, you are limiting yourself in scope. So if you're trying to do things with ands and ors and things like that, you basically could be potentially limiting yourself there as well. Anywho, PowerShell syntax operators. So obviously grouping expressions. Think bomb-das. We always think bomb-das. So anything that basically you've got something in here, and you've obviously have a you've got a grouping expression here. I'm just gonna quickly change my pointer color. You have a grouping expression here. You've got a grouping expression here. You've got a grouping expression. Oh, damn it! Sorry, I hit the wrong button. Let me do this again. Like that, and now I'm just going to group these by color. So you have a grouping expression here, change color, and then you have a grouping expression here. So essentially, the nested groups, grouping expressions will get executed first, and then basically the subsequent parent one. So obviously, quite handy to you can obviously group different things together, but yeah, think bomb-das. So brackets always gets processed first before any of the other order operations within math. So it's an easy way to remember it. Dollar parentheses is a sub-expression operator. Double colon is a static member operator. I'm just going to change the color back to red. Then you have the and call operator. So essentially, an and call operator allows you to run PowerShell from a string. So you can have an actual string of, you know, I'm just going to go GCI, which is get child item. Essentially, the and call operator, that's an and, by the way. I can't do that whole thing. Actually, I probably can't. No. Okay, that's my attempt. So yeah, that's pretty terrible. But essentially, it just allows you to execute PowerShell from a string. Format operator, so obviously formats a string, and then dot source operator runs a script or method or whatever. So essentially, dot sourcing dot sourcing runs it in the current scope. So if you're executing a script, it'll actually bring the all the variables, all the everything that's within this the child script or the child function, and bring it into the same PowerShell scope. So essentially, you should be able to address all your bits and pieces. So if you have a whole bunch of functions, you can basically bring those functions in and do what you need to do. So that's pretty much that. Let's erase all ink. PowerShell automatic variables, so they're really read-only variables. You can change them, but essentially they just store state information for PowerShell. You can obviously PS version table is Windows, is Mac OS, is Linux. These are just generic variables that you can use. It's fairly and there's a whole bunch of other ones there. So if you're interested in actually looking at them all, highly encourage you to, because there's a lot of there's some very good ones there. Let me just quickly grab that link, paste that in here. That is the link for that. So we'll keep cracking on. So obviously, definitely recommend you guys to check them out. They're very handy to know. PowerShell tokens and special characters. So again, segment. Basically, a token is just a segment of PowerShell command text. So just quickly again, I'm just going to bring out the pen. This is a token. This is a token. So there's token number 1. There's token number 2. So essentially, you can do there's special characters that allow you to get information from those tokens. So obviously, it's pretty straightforward. Special characters. Again, special characters contain in a string represent characters that are denoted by a backtick. There's, with the exception to percentage minus, but essentially they basically do specific things within a string. So you can tab, you can send alerts to speakers, though sending an alert to a speaker doesn't work within PowerShell core. Preference variables. So these basically are hard coded to control the behavior of PowerShell. I'm just going to quickly put this in the chat as well, because these are really important to know. So essentially, you can control how PowerShell will slideshow, get rid of that. Essentially, you can control different actions of how PowerShell will process those actions. So for example, you could have if error action preference, which is basically to silently continue. So globally, it'll ignore all errors. So that's terminating. That's terminating and non-terminating errors. So yeah, straightforward. Leading into that, terminating non-terminating errors. Obviously, terminating error stops the statement from running. So essentially, that will get passed up to the parent until it's handled. So if it's not handled, PowerShell will stop the script, the function, the pipeline. Non-terminating errors won't do that. So essentially, a non-terminating error is it'll throw the error, but it'll just still carry on. So it's the final stop before actually terminating in terms of notifications. So you'd have a warning if something is bad, that the person would need to be warned about. But essentially, an error still constitutes an error. But you obviously don't, that error is not significant for it to stop. So we can just carry on. A good one is if you run a get child item. You don't have access to a specific directory. It's not essential, so it'll just carry on. So that's a really good example. All right. Try catch finally. So essentially, to be able to handle terminating and non-terminating errors, you can use try catch statements or the finally statement to do that. So essentially, the process of that is PowerShell will raise a terminating error. A terminating error is raised in the try block. The error is added to the error variable, which is an automatic variable, which you can query. And PowerShell searches for the catch block with the exception type. So you obviously within catch blocks, you can specify different exception types to catch. And then the finally is executed. So that's pretty straightforward. Finally is optional. Catch is optional. However, you need to either have one or you need to have one or the other. So you can have a try finally, catch finally, or try catch finally. But you can't have a catch finally. That just doesn't work. So that's pretty much try catch finally. PowerShell output streams. Good to know. So basically, there's different types of PowerShell streams. So we've got obviously the success stream. That's what all the pipeline uses. So that's your output stream. That was introduced in PowerShell 2. You've got the error stream, you've got the warning stream, verbose, debug information. So obviously the notable ones are the fact that the noteworthy items here: PowerShell 2, PowerShell 3, PowerShell 5. Now you really shouldn't be using PowerShell 3 anymore. It's just been Visual Studio for PowerShell. The Visual Studio plugin for PowerShell 3 is being, I think it's for PowerShell 3 and 4, is being removed from Visual Studio Code. So it definitely is putting onus on PowerShell 5. You guys pretty much, PowerShell 5 it should be the minimum standard that you guys should be using. If you have operating systems that obviously are running 2012, you know, there's still going to be a few of them out in the wild. You can obviously install the Windows Management Framework and then basically upgrade them to PowerShell 5. Even though you do upgrade them to PowerShell 5, there is little bits and pieces under the hood that is slightly different. So you need to be very, very careful with those machines. Essentially, the rule of thumb is obviously those kinds of machines should have an end of life. They should have a life cycle end of life process. So essentially, those machines should you should start to look at deprovisioning them and then basically creating new versions with either 2016 or 2019. So yeah. Questions? Anyone got any questions? Sorry, I'm going to be drinking a lot of water today. It's actually because it's going to get very hot. So questions? Anyone got questions? I'm just going to leave it for a few seconds. I know the stream's about 5-second delay, so I'm just going to hang around for a sec and then we'll keep going on. Time's at 9:16. Good. All right, let's keep going. So no questions. That's all good. Actually, I'm going to quickly, before we go, I'm just going to quickly link you guys the YouTube channel. So if any of you guys are looking for it, I'll just quickly do that for you. 1 second. I'm just getting this. How do I close? Get out. Exit and show. There we go. Just quickly open up product window. So if we go to youtube.com, we'll go Brisbane PowerShell. Brisbane PowerShell user group. Quickly jump in here. Obviously we are live. I've just brought up the video. And if we go playlists, PowerShell101Live. So this is all the different videos. So I'm just gonna quickly chat that to you guys, so you guys can, if you need to follow that up, that's all good. So let's keep carrying on. The next part is getting around with PowerShell. So what we're going to be doing is we're just kind of going to be, it's going to be more, this is not going to be as formal. It's going to just be more things that I do. So there's going to be other, like, it's different people are going to have different techniques of getting around. I'm just going to show you what I do that really helps me. And these will really kind of helped me make the transition. I'm just going to throw a quick poll out there. How many people out there are still using VBScript? I'm actually quite interested. If you're still using VBScript, throw a quick hello in. I'm just very intrigued to see if there's anyone out there who's using VB, or if you're still writing batch scripts, or if you have batch scripts in your environment. I don't think anyone is. It's either that or people can't actually chat because they're not signed in, but that's all right. It's all good. So I'm gonna tell before we get started, I'm gonna tell you guys a bit of a story about how I got into PowerShell, so you guys can kind of it's a bit of it helps everyone relate here. So one of the things I did was back in the day. This is 2005. I learned VBScript, so that was back when I was actually at school. I started learning VBScript, and I was obviously very heavily in VB.NET. VB.NET, obviously writing a lot of VBScript. I had a really good, my father actually gave me a really awesome piece of documentation. It was made by Ed Wilson. It was basically just a help file with all the different kind of conditions that you could use within PowerShell, within VBScript. So I wrote a ton of VBScript, and basically one of the things that I remember doing was when obviously going into IT and actually writing some code, and then they go, hey, this guy can write code. So I wrote a couple of tools in one of the places I worked at, which was really quite cool. These tools were, very, very, very rock solid. But essentially what happened was I started at another job, and my boss there basically said, no more VB script, you're learning PowerShell. And it was quite funny because the reason why he taught me PowerShell was because he didn't actually know VB script. He was like, nah, you're learning PowerShell. And at the end of the day, that was actually a smart decision, because obviously VB script really had a lot of limitations within how you could actually do specific actions. So if you wanted to work with Active Directory, you would consign to LDAP querying, things like that. And obviously PowerShell, even in PowerShell 2, you had a ton more functionality than what you had in terms of from VB script. And this is PowerShell 2 was bare bones. So obviously you had the Active Directory module, you had the Exchange module in 2010. These things really, really helped systems administrators to do their jobs. So, we had PowerShell running everywhere. And then obviously we had PowerShell 3. PowerShell 3 came out, and we had obviously interaction with web, so we're obviously using REST services and things like that. But essentially that was pretty much like as a shortened version of my journey to PowerShell. It was definitely a struggle to begin with. Going from VBScript to PowerShell was a different concept, because obviously with any sort of programming language, especially object-oriented programming language, the preference is to write it like an object-oriented programming language. But PowerShell also has this thing called the pipeline, and the pipeline really kind of helped you accelerate that process. But for a person who's coming from an object-oriented programming background, it kind of really didn't like it was very hard to kind of articulate. So the pipeline really was something that I struggled with initially, but then basically, obviously, through practice, you get better at it. So let's get stuck into it. It also helps if I actually have the PowerPoint thing running. So the first one is select object. I feel like select object is one of the most underrated commandlets out there in the wild. Select objects has been around since the inception of PowerShell. But select object is really it's something that people kind of tend to forget about, but it's always good to have. It's one of those things that it just helps you get stuff done really, really quickly. So if you need to get the last, the last item in a collection, and you need to pipe that to something else, select object's your friend. It really helps you quickly just get stuff done without having to result to actually writing any sort of object-oriented code. So most of the time you see people just be like going blah blah blah, where object, select, and essentially that's the whole premise of getting that stuff done. So you basically I just want that data, I don't want to see anything else, that's the data I only need to care about. So basically that's the data that we're going to query. And essentially, that's all it really does. Now, the one thing about select object, it does create a new object. So that's the reason why select object was in the object creation. It actually creates a new object. But essentially, it selects specified properties of an object, and it selects those, and it can select sets of objects. So you can go, I want the name, I want the ID, I want the unique, and then you can actually then do filtering, like you want the unique. So you want to filter out all the duplicates, or you want the you want the position. Oh, sorry, you want the sorry, I'm just having a massive memory blank. You want to have you want to select the position. So you want either the first 5 or you want the last 3. You can exclude properties and things like that. So it's select object, super underrated, but it's one of the it's a really, really good thing to have. So we're just going to quickly jump into VS Code. That's WaterFox. That's not VS Code. I'm just going to fire up VS Code. So essentially, I'm just going to open another directory. Lesson 6 demo, select folder. So we're just going to write some select objects. So essentially, I'm also going to zoom in a bit. Control Shift plus. No. Just want to make sure that's good enough for you guys to read. Let me just make sure that's good to read. Yep, sweet, cool. So essentially, most people use default use of select object. So most people generally use select object like this. So you're going to, let's just use get process. Get process is the easiest one to use. So we're just going to get process and you're going to select name, select object name. Now you don't have to go full select object. You can obviously, I'm going to actually use the alias, but essentially the alias is just select. It just makes it super easy. So think of it as like this SQL statement. So, but we're just going to, in this instance, we're just going to go name. So essentially, this is how generally people are going to use it. And you can see that PS Script Analyzer is having a bit of a whinge about it. We're going to leave it. This is when we're kind of just messing around in PowerShell. You can alias to your heart's content. There's no issue with that. So obviously, it also helps if I actually can spell. So you can obviously see that we have a get process. So let's just stick that in a quick variable. I'm just going to do it like this as well. I'm just going to stick this on this variable. So essentially, you can see here, oops, you can execute that. We can dump out var, and you can see there, basically, it's the exact same process. The one thing that is it's really important to note though, is I'm just going to quickly show you something. It is its own object, and so the way that select, sorry, let me just quickly articulate that. Let me just quickly reiterate. Re-explain that because I just completely stuffed that up. So essentially, when you run a get process, when you do a select object, it is creating a new object. So always think about it creating a new object. So when you're selecting a property name, it's creating a new object with the property name. So essentially, if we run get member on this, you can see the property. There's a property called name. So people can get caught out by this, and we're going to talk about this a little bit later, but essentially you need to remember, if you don't want to do that, you need to use select unique. But we'll just select expand. But we can just quickly talk about that. So some people will be like, is equal to MS Paint. And they're like, why is this not working? And the reason why is because you need to specify the property. If you're basically doing a select object, let's just go to VS Code. If you select the property, obviously, then you have the value that you can compare against. So it's important to actually remember that. So that's one of the little gotchas with select object. So select object creates with the property. All right, so next one. So other ways of using select objects. Actually, no. Before we do that, we're going to show select expand. So you don't actually have to do that. So we can use select expand to actually select that specific property. So the expand parameter basically selects the property for us. So we just get a string array. So we don't actually get the full. We don't get an object. We just get an array of data. So if we go var equals get process, and then we go select, and then we're going to expand, or expand property. It's actually expand property. We're just going to, I just usually just call it expand. And then basically we can go name. So what this does is it basically selects the name. So if we run this, you can see, I'm just going to right at the top, you can see its thing. There's no property, and we can actually just do a quick get member, and you can see here that it's just a type system string, so it's just a string array. So select object is really, that's one of the ways you can work around that. So other things that select object can do. So one of the other cool things that select object can do is basically you can do first, last, those kinds of things. So essentially, let's again, so let's just paint the scenario. You're working in the, cool. You're working within the pipeline. You need the first 5, let's say. This is a really, really quick, handy, dirty way of just getting stuff to you. So, and we're just going to say, okay, yep, we're going to say select name. We're going to select name, first 5, that's fine. So you can see here, there's the first 5. We're going to expand that. Let's expand that. Expand property, name, first 5. So we're just going to get a string array of the first 5 process names from get process. That's a really, really quite cool thing with first. Now we can use the last parameter as well. So we can do get process, select, expand property, name, last 5. Now, this is actually something that was really quite an interesting chat, like an interesting concept. Is let's say, for example, you need the 5th item in the collection or an array. So what you can actually do here, this is something really cool. It's just a quick, dirty way of doing it. And this is obviously just quick and dirty things that you can do when you're working in the pipeline. Quick and dirty way to get the 5th item within the element, within the array. So what you can do here is we can just go get process, select, expand property, name, first 5, and then we can go last 1. So that's basically going to select the first 5 properties, and then it's going to select the last one of those 5. So we should only get 1. So you can see it's your phone, and if I run just the first ones, you can see, oh, interesting, actually that didn't work. So actually that didn't work. So what we need to do is we then need to go select last one like that. So we need to pipe it to another select query to get the last one. So you can see there, it's now Apple mobile device service. So essentially, it's a really quite like quick and dirty way to do things. Now you can actually do when you're selecting properties, you can actually just go select star. So similar to SQL, so we can go select star. So we can go get process like so. That will work. You can see we get all the data. That's pretty straightforward. So one of the things that's really, really quite cool, but it's just a little gotcha, is excluding properties. So when you're excluding properties within PowerShell, essentially within select, essentially you need to select the property first before you can exclude it. So if we go select object, let's just go get process. And we're going to go select object. And then we're going to go property star, so we're going to get everything. And then we're going to exclude the property. Then we can actually exclude the property. Oops. So we can then exclude the property name. So you actually have to get all the properties to exclude it first. So it's kind of a little gotcha. If you think, oh, okay, I'm just going to get it, do this, and then, no, that doesn't work. You have to get all the property, like, select object needs to be aware of all the properties before it can exclude it. So it's a little gotcha. So that's just a little gotcha. All right, cool. So that's pretty much it. And the final thing we're going to quickly show you is select expressions. So one of the really cool thing is, we kind of briefly touched this, is that essentially select expressions are really quite handy when you need to do formatting in the pipeline quickly, and you need to create a quick property to do some extra value, checks. So essentially, let's say we're going to go get process, we're going to go select property, select object, and essentially what we need to do is we need to get the file path for the executable. Let's just say that's a really good example. In this example, what we can actually do is we can define a hash table, and the hash table has a name. So that the first, it has two key items. It has a name and an expression. So the name is actually going to be the property name. We're just going to call this test property. And then we obviously, because we're actually using, we're writing this in a single line, we're going to use the semicolon to end that specific expression, which is that value. And then we're going to say expression. And you can see here, these are predefined. Now you can shorten them, so you can go, you know, N or an E, but essentially, you can, yeah. Now one of the really, and then in here, you define a script block, which is basically just executable code. So in here, you can basically use your pipeline input. You can use all those kinds of bits and pieces, and we can actually do different things. But let's just do a write output, and we're just going to go hello world. So essentially, what we can do here is we're basically just telling it to execute this. This is just executable code. You can do whatever you want in here. So essentially, we can then go ahead and run this, and you can see it's going to output all the things, but that's kind of boring. Like that kind of sucks. So what we're going to do now is we're actually just going to put the name. So we're going to go format underscore dot name. So essentially, it's going to go hello world. Obviously, we're using the format operator, so that's a 0 index, and then we're specifying dollar underscore, so the current pipeline variable, and we're specifying the name property. So essentially, if we run this, we can see it didn't work. Because the reason why it didn't work is because we need to use a grouping expression to actually group this statement together, so it'll execute this first before executing this. So if we run this again, you can see here we basically got all our names and it's just outputting. This is really handy for those things, like let's say you're getting child items and you need to format the file size rather than bytes in an actual gigabytes. So you'd create a quick property called gigabytes, and you just, you know, divide by 1024 divided by 1024 by 1024. So it's a really quite handy tool to actually quickly create a quick property in the pipeline and get stuff done. So select expressions, definitely check it out. So anyway, that's select object. I've rambled enough on it. Next one is export CLI.XML and convert to JSON. These are two, I personally feel like these are two commandlets that not many people know about, but they're very, very handy to know about. They're very, very good. The next slide is going to talk about why, but essentially what export CLI.XML and convert to JSON is I'm just going to quickly paste these links in there so you guys can have a look at them. Essentially what these are is you have, it's the ability to export object data to text, to a file. It's just different types. So essentially CLI.XML is a common language infrastructure. So the type format is XML, so it's exporting to XML, but it's not just a normal XML; it's CLI.XML. So it's basically creating it creates a common language infrastructure XML, XML based object or objects. So essentially, what it can do is it can preserve type. And that's really, really quite handy when you're exporting quickly to CLI.XML, you know, like system.processes. I'll talk about serializing and deserializing in a second. It does preserve type, and it's very, very handy to work with, but there's some situations when it won't. I mean, that's like with custom classes. So if you have a custom class instantiated, that won't do it. It'll just convert it to a PS object and then actually export it. But essentially, it's really handy because then basically you can export. Think of it as if you wanted to take something offline. You need to work something offline, especially within unit testing, integration testing. You needed a mock, and you needed mock data. This is an exceptional way of doing it. You can use JSON or CLI.XML. You can use YAML if you really wanted to, but essentially, it's just they're just the two types. I do prefer CLI.XML because CLI.XML preserves type, and I have had issues with nested objects with JSON, so I generally stick to CLI.XML because PowerShell is able to handle it a little bit better, and you can test a little bit. You can test it a little bit more extensively. That said, there are things within it. Obviously has its bugs, and then I remember there was a bug that I had where I couldn't fully export it and there was a specific character. I can't remember, but there was an issue with it. But essentially, so obviously with CLI.XML, we covered that. So it exports we talk about its serializers. So essentially what you have serializing and deserializing. And so essentially what serializing is when you actually converting, you're exporting, let's just call it, you're exporting, and deserializing is you're importing. So you're basically deserializing it into an object, or you're serializing it as text. So essentially with export XML, you have export XML. The opposite will be import XML, so that's pretty straightforward. And then obviously you have convert to JSON. Now convert to JSON doesn't have the ability to convert to an actual file, so you have to pipe it to out file. But it's the same on the way in. So essentially you have to do get content and then pipe it to convert from JSON. But basically you have convert to JSON and you have convert JSON. So essentially you're serializing and deserializing. Like I said, it doesn't preserve object type. So if you do have a PS custom PS custom object, if you do have a specific object type, like system, well, like I don't know, like some random .NET object, it'll just convert it to a PS object. Yeah. Just getting a whole bunch of Facebook messages. So essentially that's basically yeah. Now I'm going to quickly show you guys this because it's always good to see this in action. So let's discard. Now one of the other things which is really good with XML is you can export credentials with. So XML is really awesome for exporting credentials. So you can save your passwords into XML and it actually keeps that. But I generally don't like. I generally try not to save passwords, whether it's in XML, whether it's in any script. I try and keep them in a secure place. So if you're using Azure Key Vault, things like that. So anyway, so we're quickly going to jump in here. We're going to jump back to our demos, and we're going to go to export XML. So we're just going to again use get process. So we're just going to go get process. We're going to go export XML. I can actually say. Now, XML was introduced in PowerShell 3, so if you're trying to do this in PowerShell 2, just saying, obviously shouldn't be using PowerShell 2, it's not going to be there. And also, obviously, serializing, deserializing from JSON as well, that's not going to be present, obviously, due to the fact that that was introduced in PowerShell 3. So one of the things you can do here is, obviously, we can export XML, so I'm just going to put it in the same path. Now, this is just me, but I generally just basically, I always kind of, if I'm exporting with XML, I just give it the XML file extension. It doesn't, you can give it anything, it just helps me articulate what is what. So essentially, let's go ahead and we've just exported that. You can see that it's still running, so it's still taking its sweet as time. Depending on the depth, so what I'm talking about with what we call the depth is basically how deep do you want to go to and how much data you want to export. So essentially by default it's a depth of 3, so it'll go 3 properties deep and it'll export all that data. Any deeper and you are going to see a significant performance slowdown. You can see here this was quite slow, so we can actually now, let's have a look at this content. So let's quickly, we can see here there is my XML. Let's just don't show again. Let's just change this to XML. And you can see here, essentially it's XML, but it's obviously it doesn't look like normal XML. It's XML. So this is essentially how PowerShell exports it. And you can see there's a lot of data. Like it is quite large. Obviously there's 30. That's 319,000 lines. I just got a Discord message. Just quickly suss that out. Someone send me a Discord message. I got a. That could be. Is that Slack? No, it's Discord. I don't know. Oh well. So essentially, if you're trying to reach me, can you quickly chat it? If you chat it to me, I didn't get your message. That's alright though. If you got questions, just throw them in the chat. Anyway, so just checking that. Need help? No, I don't see anything raised. Oops, that was the wrong one. So essentially, this is how XML is exported. So let's go ahead and import it. So we import the XML. Actually, I'm just going to quickly before we do that, I just want to show you the type. So XML. So essentially, if we run a quick get member, you can see here, it's a system.diagnostics.process. Now we've exported it. Let's go ahead and import it. So we're going to then do, actually we don't do that. We go import XML. We're just going to get path. It's going to give it the same path. And essentially, we're just going to store it in a variable like so. We're going to then execute it, and you can see it took a few seconds to import. And you can see there's all our data. We can actually go format list. It's all there. Very, very, very handy to know, and very, very handy to use. And one of the things what we're actually going to quickly do is we're going to show the type. So this is something that you can see here. I'll just quickly clear the screen so we can kind of simplify this. Essentially, you can see here, the type name is deserialized system.diagnostics.process. So essentially, it is the same type. Like they technically are different, like because obviously it's a different type name, but it means that you can do, you can still work with it. You can still test with it. So that's basically XML export import. Let's do convert to JSON. It also helps if I can actually spell my demos correctly. So what we're going to do is we're going to go get process, convert to JSON, and we're just going to quickly show you what it looks like so you guys can get a bit of a feel. You can see again it takes a little time. It's obviously got to run that through the pipeline, and then it's going to run that. So let's let that run. Just quickly seeing how much else we've got. We've got a long way to go. Okay, you can see there we've got a whole bunch of JSON. So let's Control C that. The terminal has no section copy. I know that. I just want to stop. Okay, perfect. So essentially what we can do is we can now outfile it. Demo.json. So let's convert it to JSON. So we're basically running it. You can see it's converting to JSON. Let's let it finish. Now JSON basically stands for JavaScript Object Notation. So essentially it's just another variant of XML. Plain text, basically the ability to put plain text, export something as plain text, data as plain text. Okay, so next part. So obviously get process. Let's have a quick look at it. So you can see here, same kind of concept. You can see it's exported all to XML. It's significantly shorter, so obviously it's 45,000, so it doesn't preserve all that extra type data. But essentially, if you just want a quick and dirty dump, it's obviously it's there for you. So let's import it. I'm just going to import it as a variable. Get content. So we're going to run get content, and then it's going to get path. It's going to go convert to JSON. Yep, and then we're going to basically show the type. So essentially, I want you to show that it does vary. So this is quite important. So essentially, let's get rid of that. Let's hit go. Let's execute that. So you can see, I actually made a big boo-boo. There's one thing I didn't do, and that was convert from JSON. So essentially, if we dump our var, you can see there's an object. One thing though, it's really important to note is if we run get member on it, it's reserialized. The type is different. It's not the other. It's not the old deserialized blah 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 or anything. It's a PS custom object. Everything will be basically turned into a PS custom object. Very very important to remember. Now there's actually one I completely forgot, and it kind of just quickly occurred to me, and that's convert to and convert from CSV. So essentially, another one you can actually do is obviously convert to and from CSV. So I'm just going to create a quick demo for you guys. So this is really handy for when you're doing reporting. So basically, you can convert objects into CSV files. Obviously, you know, if you're doing filtering or you're doing some work in Excel or anything like that, really quite cool to use. So let's just do the same thing. We're going to go get processed. I'm going to go. We can do okay. Now you can convert to CSV, which obviously will convert it to CSV. Another one. So this is how generally people think you can do something like this. So you can basically take that data and it just turns it into a CSV. Quite straightforward, quite easy. If you want to actually export it to something, you can actually, rather than doing a convert to and from, you can actually just export. So if we go get process, and then we can go export CSV, then we can just go path. Like so. It means that you can obviously export your data as CSV. So it's obviously running, it's exporting it to a CSV. Just wait for it to complete. Okay, that's done. So you can see here, it's a CSV. If we reveal an Explorer, and we can actually open it up in Excel. And here's our nice format. So we can basically, you know, you can obviously do things like that. That's one way to, obviously if you need to filter in Excel. You also, remember, you also have out grid view, so you can obviously out grid view it as well. So that's another way you can do it. But anyway, we've got 8 minutes and we've got a certain amount of slides to go. Anyway, so object properties and nested objects. So one of the things that we're always got to be very careful of is when we're working with objects, different types of objects can exist within it. So a lot of people can kind of get caught up within their scripts. This is something that I generally see quite a bit. Where they have a script and it's going, okay, I need to do this specific thing and I'm getting this property and I'm trying to compare it, but it's just not working, and then the script's behaving weirdly. And the reason why is because you could be doing, you're doing essentially the property might not be able to be matched on. So essentially what we need to do here is it's always important to check. Now another thing which is really quite cool is this is one of these things. Sometimes there actually might be a property that can help you. And there's actually a really good example. Let's see if I'm going to grab this code. Let's go see if I can find this code. I've got to go through a really long chat. Just trying to find this. No, where is this? Let's try and find this code. So this is actually a really good example. I'm just going to quickly grab this code. This is one of the guys who's actually I was teaching in PowerShell. So essentially, I'm just going to bring this up in Notepad. Actually, no, we'll paste it in VS Code. Is there a list objects number? Cool. So essentially, the way that he was calculating the weekday was basically going. I'm just going to quickly go get date. Get date. And what he was doing was he was going, I think he had like a do loop here, something like this. And it was like, I think it was something like this. I'm just writing quick pseudocode here for a sec. So essentially that's what he did. Obviously this is quite pseudo, so it's not going to work, but you guys get the gist. So essentially this is what the code he had initially, which was basically. Now, one of the things is that you can actually take a shortcut. So this is what I'm talking about. Sometimes there's always a property there that you might not know about that can help you. So essentially what he was doing is he was running get date. He's getting the day of the week, which is completely fine. You can see it's Saturday today. But what he was doing, he was converting it to an integer value. So he could basically calculate some other items on it. Fair enough, that's cool. But in this instance, if we actually have a look at, this is what I was talking about. If we have a look at the day of the week, you can see it's getting there. And if we run a get member on it, you can see the type is system.day of the week. So the default toString value will be its day of, like it's that item. But there's a property down here called value underscore underscore, and it's an integer. And so you think, well, hang on a second. I can literally remove all this code here by just doing this. So you can see now we can replace all that with just this. So essentially, you don't even need to write this code. This logic is completely unneeded. So this is what I'm talking about. There always could be a property within there that basically can help you. So don't be afraid to get in there and have a look for it, because you might be surprised. There always might be something lingering in there that is going to definitely help you out. And it's going to obviously make your code look easy, making your code more maintainable. So that's basically a really good example of the properties, nested properties kind of approach. Get member format list. These two commandlets are like the best commandlets to remember. They are your friend. They are there to help you get around in PowerShell. So essentially, you have here, we obviously have get member. So obviously, remember, get member returns a list of the properties, the methods, the events, all that kind of stuff associated with a project, with an object. So you can get member the living hell out of anything that you need to work out what you need to do. So it's very good for that kind of scratch pad. Format list can also help you if you need a quick list to kind of, quickly fuff around. So I'll quickly show you as a quick demo. So if we go get pros, actually let's just use the day of the week, because that was actually a really good one. So let's say you're messing around in here. I'm just going to put it in a variable. So you got date week, date of week. So essentially you're messing around in here. You're doing what you need to do. You can then basically run get member. Have a look at that that content. I'm just going to quickly copy that code like so. So essentially, info, I'm just going to call it info so I don't have to write full words. So essentially run this and you can go, okay, these are my methods. Now these are my properties. Sweet. We can see that there's a kind property, millisecond, ticks, time of year. There's a whole bunch of interesting properties there. So sweet. So then we obviously have, we can see here, if we actually rerun that, sorry, you can see here these properties have different types. We've got a time span, we've got an integer, and we've got the system.object.datetime. This is what I'm talking about. So these kinds of little gotchas. So let's say we're looking at the datetime, like that's something we're going to be interested in. So we can go, .datetime, have a look at it. Okay, that's interesting, and then we can go get member on it again. So essentially, datetime, and you can see here there's a whole bunch of different other methods and properties that we can actually use. So it's a system.type string. Okay, cool, and we obviously now know we can compare it if we need to do stuff with it. So that's really quite handy to like it's get member is essentially essential to be able to help you kind of get around in PowerShell and articulate where you need to go and what properties. Now another really cool thing you can use is format list. So this is something that I use quite a bit if I'm just looking for data quickly. So let's go get process. We're just going to select the first one, and I'm just going to go format list. And then I'm just going to say I want to see everything. Now the reason why I use format list is because it provides a quick and dirty list versus a table. I want to see a quick list. I can quickly scroll up and go, okay, yep. Now name is process. Okay, sweet, that's all good. This is the process name. This is the working set. So it's a really just quick and easy way of viewing your data. Just quickly paste that there like so. Make sure that's right. So that's really format list. It's really quite handy for that. Next one is debug. So in the previous lesson, we talked about it. I'm running a little bit over, so I'm just going to kind of speed through this one. But essentially, did I actually put it in there? I think I did. Yes, I did. So essentially, you can drop. We know from our example back here. I'm actually going to. We're not going to run that. We're just going to run D. Get rid of all this. So essentially, we can run this and we can drop breakpoints like so, and we can actually work within the actual terminal to actually articulate. So if there's a condition or something that's not working, we can just quickly jump in here and start working on it. So if we're not sure, because what's in files, okay, yep, okay, we got files, okay, let's use our quick, let's select our first one and let's just have a look at the data. So I'm just going to go format list star, and we can quickly just go, okay, yep, this is what I'm looking at. So it really helps you guys. It really helps me personally just quickly articulate why a specific issue is happening, and then from that I actually write my condition in here in line. So I'm going to write my condition in line, and I know the script's going to fail. That's completely fine. But because I know everything is in memory and everything is loaded, this is the best time to write your conditions because you know everything's in memory. So you can quickly go, yep, files dot name is equal to ms is in ms paint. Okay, that didn't work. Okay, let's try that again. Let's try files.name is in, and you can kind of work out from that what's going on. So we can see, okay, that was the reason why. So if we go files.name is in, actually, and then I realized, oh wait, I'm using an in. I should be using contains. So we're going to quickly flip that because I made my logic was wrong, and then we're going to go test.log like so. Then we get our true. So essentially the debug really helps you quickly get your answer without having to kind of guess. You can write your condition right there. You can copy and paste it, and then basically replace that line of code. So it's a very, very cool thing to do. That's basically debugging. Now, if you're not sure about something, lab it. So do not, like, if you're like, if a really good example is I wrote a Microsoft Identity Manager automated installer. This is a very, very big piece of code. There's a lot of moving parts. It required, obviously I'm not going to run it on a production environment. A lot of the conditions and debugging it and things like that needed to be debugged in a lab environment. So that was a really, really good example of, is a practical example of, testing your code against, lab environments. But also, if you're unsure about PowerShell behavior, so if you're thinking, like, a good example is, what's disable ADUs are going to do, and you're not 100% sure, like, obviously go and read the synopsis. If you're still not sure, lab it. Do not, under any circumstances, run it in an environment where you're unsure of the behavior. Because at the end of the day, though, if you're introducing a bug into your code, that could potentially have crazy serious ramifications. If you need to take the data offline and you're basically just working with it, like, so let's say you're just working with some data, like, for example, the process data, or you're working with AWS data or Azure data from, like S3 buckets or from blob storage. Essentially, convert it to XML, take it offline, put it on your machine, and just work from that. So essentially, you're pretty much using XML or Json to be able to mock the data source. So essentially, you're mocking that data. Now, the data is accurate, but essentially you're not using live data. So you can quickly take it offline, do what you need to do with it, and it just helps you guys articulate what's going on without actually having to affect production. So that's a really, really quite a good thing. And again, if it's a very, very high risk commandlet, put it in literally spin up a lab environment. So if you need a domain controller, spin up your own domain controller. Run it in your own lab environment before running it in any sort of production environment, because again, the consequences could be bad. If you're still not sure, there's I've just quickly chucked 2 links in here. So you obviously got the Microsoft documentation. You got another piece of documentation I use is SS64. Obviously, the PowerShell, there's obviously the PowerShell Slack channel, things like that can also help. So you can actually just ask for help in that, and people can it's very responsive, so you generally get answers fairly quickly. Obviously, PowerShell.org has its own scripting help forum, so you can obviously post in there as well. So that's another obviously way to do it. This is one that I do think is very, very important for any person that's learning something new. Is that if you don't use it, you're going to lose it. Especially the grasping the concept is very important to begin with, but if you don't use it, you're just never going to use. Like it's something that's never going to develop, and you're not going to be able to write more. You're not going to be able to write any more advanced content. You're just going to be basically writing basic content. So essentially, make PowerShell your default command line editor in Windows. Do not use command prompt. That will force you. So if you need to do, ping. Now, I generally, like, when I'm floating around, I was raised, like, actually got taught DOS. So it's actually one of the greatest skills I have, because it translates to this day. But essentially, I treat PowerShell as a command editor. So if you can see me, I'm clearing the screen, and I'm not typing clear host. What's it? I don't even remember what the alias is, but essentially I just treat it as a command editor. I'm like, dir, or if you're in Linux, you can ls. So if you want to be, super PowerShell, you can go CGI, which is get child. GCI, which is get child item. So essentially you can do these aliases to get around, but essentially just treat it as a command editor. It is a command editor. You can actually do things within it. So obviously you've got all the standard command prompt items within there. So you can just treat it as a command editor. It's very intuitive. Obviously, when you're doing PowerShell, use the pipeline. So if you're using, if you're if you're using Active Directory, don't go to VB script and write LDAP queries. You force yourself to run PowerShell. Use the Active Directory module. And then also finally, start off by writing some small personal projects. So not obviously, don't try and reinvent the wheel. Don't write something that's too massively over your head. It's always good to have dreams. So for example, you can write that kind of code, but essentially you're limiting yourself, and you're just going to give up. So it's really quite handy to basically, obviously, working with PowerShell, start small, work on some small projects, and that always works. All right, so I think we've reached half time for at the moment. Yep, we've reached half time. So what we're going to do now is I'm just going to have a small intermission of about 10 minutes, and then we're going to crack on into PowerShell scripting part 2. It's actually part 3. I'm just going to quickly rename that. And so basically here we're just going to be creating a basic script to create a virtual machine. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to crack some Spotify tunes back on. I'm going to give it a 5-minute break because we're running a little bit over, and we'll reconvene in 5 minutes and we'll carry on. All right, we'll see you then. Alrighty, we are back. Okay. Let's go do a quick test. Stop my Spotify. Alright. Just going to quick make sure that my mic's working. Everything's still good. Okay. We're good. Alright. So, part 3 of PowerShell and scripting. We're going to write some code. Let's write some code. So, essentially our scenario is when the computer decides to catch up. We're going to be creating a basic script that creates a virtual machine in client Hyper-V. I'm going to create a VM. I'm going to allocate some memory. I'm going to create a disk. We're going to attach a disk and we're going to start it. So the first thing we need to do is restart Visual Studio Code as an administrator, because we're obviously interacting with administrative functions. So let's go ahead and restart administrator as administrator. And we're going to focus on the screen so you guys can see what's going on. Let's keep cracking on. So I'm just going to quickly paste the scenario in here. So ultimately, in this situation, we need to ask for a VM. Just want to make sure. Okay, cool. I'm just gonna Hyper-V turn some VMs off so we don't actually. We can keep the Docker one running. Alright, so I'm just turning some VMs off so I can get some memory back. It should be right now. Yep, there we go. Okay, cool. So what we can do here is we need to ask, hey, what do you want to call the VM? We need to ask for a VM name. So we're just going to go use the read host commandlet, and we're just going to say prompt, and we're going to say enter in the VM name. We're also going to go VM path. Now, there's two things that obviously what we need to do here. Firstly is we need to test if the VM already exists and if the path so that's going to be our first thing that we need to do here. So let's test the VM name. So what we can do here is we can just say if get VM name is VM name, and we're just going to return down there, and we're just going to go we're just going to go throw. So we're going to create a terminating error, and we're just going to say VM already exists, like so. We're going to now test the VM. We're going to test the VM path. So if get VM, so we're going to then go if test path, literal path, VM path. We're going to say path type directory. I think it's not directory. What's the path type? Again, so I'm not sure what the path type is, so I'm going to quickly go to PowerShell help. So here, I'm just going to quickly have a quick read. What is the path type? Leaf. We're going to be looking for a leaf. So that's to check for a file. Test the path for a profile. That's cool. Actually, we can actually just say is valid. Let's actually use is valid. So we're actually going to make sure that everything's valid. Ooh, actually no, we're going to test path first. And so like so. And then we're going to test to make sure the user didn't put a dodgy path in. So we're just going to go if test path literal path VM path is valid, and then what we're going to do is flip it and put a not. So we're only looking for items that don't have a path valid. If already exists, I'm just going to update our doco. We're going to say here if already exists, and then we're going to say here if, and if someone some dodge and if path exists and if the path is dodgy. If it's dodgy, no go. So essentially we can then just go throw path already exists, then we're going to go throw path is not valid, like so. So we've kind of starting to, obviously we're starting to flesh it all out. The path is really important because we're going to probably create our disks and all that firstly, and then we're going to because we have to attach the disk to the VM, so I'm thinking we might just create the disk first. So essentially, let's create a disk. So I'm thinking a command that's going to be, let's create a disk. Oh, we need a disk size. Let's actually ask for a disk size. So we're going to ask for a disk size. We need to test. Nah, we just won't. We'll just throw an error. So let's create a disk. So we're going to go new VHD. That's what I'm guessing it's going to be. Yep, so there we go, new VHD, and now I'm completely lost. So let's have a quick look at what new VHD is. New VHD. Let's see what we have here. So, okay, create one or more virtual disks. Yep. Okay, first thing I'm going to do is straight to the examples. New VHD, specify the path, specify the size. So you can see we can just specify GB, which is cool. We can obviously have differencing disks. We can specify fixed disks. We're just going to ignore all that. We're just going to have a dynamically expanding disk. Obviously, we can run it as a job. We can do it remotely, things like that. Cool. All right, so let's go new VHD. Let's build our parameters up. So what I'm going to do is, rather than actually just putting it in there, we're just going to actually just create we're going to splat it in. So essentially, the way I'm going to do that is I'm just going to put the path, the size bytes, like so, and then I'm just going to grab size bytes. Yep, that'll be enough. That should be enough. So essentially, we got our path, we got our size bytes. So what we're going to say is we're just going to put VM disk size in there. We should test it, but I am running a little bit out behind time, so we're kind of just going to wing it. The path is basically, we're just going to use we're going to use join path. So we're going to go join path. VM path. So we're going to call it VM path we're going to quickly go path, VM path, and we're going to go child path. I'm then going to use a grouping expression, and then I'm going to, there's a better way of doing this, I'm just kind of smashing this together. Essentially what we're going to do is go VM name, and then we're going to go, actually no, we don't need this, we can just use a grouping. The editor that I'm using is Visual Studio Code, so I just have a custom theme set on it, which is Cold Snack. But if you go VS Code, I'll just quickly chat the link in. So that's the editor that I'm using. What we can do, I'm literally kind of simplifying this a bit because I feel like that was a little overcomplicated. So essentially we can just go VHDX, like so. So it joins a path, creates that, and then we can create a new VM. So essentially we're actually going to let it error. I think what I'm going to do is set the error action on the actual commandlet to stop. So basically it treats non-terminating errors on the commandlet to stop. And we can actually just put that in here actually. Like so. And we're just going to splat that entire item in like so. Like so. So we've splattered it in. So we've got our VHD, which is cool. We now need to create our VM. This is going to be interesting. So obviously we've got new VM. Let's just jump on it. I'm just going to jump straight in here, and we're gonna have a look at what new VMs, what does it constitute to create a new VM. We've got new VM, memory startup bytes. I'm like straight to the examples because it's easier to quickly see. So you can see we can specify a name and memory startup bytes. We're gonna need to okay, look at that. We don't even need to create a VHD. We can just specify the new VHD path in here. This creates a new virtual machine that has named new2. It has 1 GB of memory and connected to a new 40 gig virtual hard disk. It's in a VHD format. Look at that. That's awesome. Okay. What else do I need in there? So we basically have well, we actually can get rid of all this. Let's get rid of that. We don't need it. I thought we needed to create a VHD, but we don't actually need to. I think if you're creating a static VM with static VHDs, it's fine. But if you're obviously doing things like differencing disks and things like that, then that's different. But that's fine. So we can. Does it specify disk size? I think it was. Yeah, it specifies. Oh. I'm just gonna quickly check what new VHD path. I love it how you can go. Oh, it's probably because it's doing case sensitive match. Okay, so you can use the new VHD path, which will create a new 40 gig. But we don't have 40 gig, we actually want to specify the size. Okay, so we can then just use the new VHD size bytes. So I'm just going to create a few just notes here. I'm just going to note this to help me articulate what I need to put in there. So you can obviously create it without any yeah. Obviously, yeah, we're going to need to put it on a network. I think we should put it on a network. I am going to get, so it specifies a friendly name of virtual network switch which you want to connect to the virtual machine. Hyper-V automatically creates a virtual machine with one virtual network adapter, but connecting to a virtual switch is optional. Well, we need to put it in a virtual switch. Yeah, 100%. We're going to put that on a virtual switch. Let's just get VM virtual. Oh, what's it going to be? How do we get a virtual switch? going to be get Hyper-V virtual switch, maybe? What we can do here is go get command, start, switch. I'm just going to go switch. See if there's anything out there. There's nothing there. I'm just going to try switch. And then I'm just going to go module, or we'll just have a quick read first. See if there's anything in here that's potentially could tell. Okay, there we go. Let's get VM switch. So if we get VM switch, once it decides to come back, okay, there's my. Okay, cool. So you can see these are all my different switches, and we're just going to tag it to our external switch. So again, this is how I'm kind of working in PowerShell, getting around in PowerShell. So we've got our switch, and I'm just going to go switch name is external, and I'm just going to grab the entire item. Just make sure that works. Yep, cool. So we're just going to put it on like that. That's fine. We need to create our own VM. So what we can do here now is we can go new VM. We give it the name, which is the VM name. We're going to give it a path. The path is going to be the VM path. And then we're going to basically say new VHD path. We're going to basically give it. We're going to I'm going to rewrite this. We're going to splat it in and make it a little bit look a little bit nicer. So we're going to say new VHD path, and we're going to say we're just going to go join path, path, which is VM path, and we're going to go child path, and then here we're just going to go VM name dot VHDX. So creating a VM, and as you can see, it's already we're getting quite large. So I'm actually going to start building the parameters to splat it in. So creating a hash table. Just going to go VM name. Just going to make sure everything's the same in terms of case sensitivity. It's not required, but it's just me being me. So essentially, we're going to go new VHD path. We're going to grab that, paste that in here. Now we don't need to worry about the grouping expression here because basically it's going to execute it anyway, so it's fine. So essentially we then need new VHD size bytes. So we're going to actually create I'm going to go disk size switch name. So in a switch name here, what we're going to do is I'm then going to run get VM switch external. So we're going to just pass through the external switch. Do we need anything else in here? I'm wondering whether we should just mount an image in as well. Yeah, let's mount an image. I'm going to go find an image. I think I've got a Windows 10 image lying around here somewhere. Do I have an image? Do I have an image? Do I have an image? I'm just going to have a quick look. I'm pretty sure I had an ISO. Just doing a quick squiz. I don't think I do. Where did all my images go? It must be on my network drive. Just gonna quickly jump on there and grab one. ISOs. Hello. Windows Server 2012 R2. Yeah, nah. Windows 10 multiple versions. When was that? 2018. This is an old build. That'll do. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna copy that, paste that. We'll just paste it in here. Let's just create a quick image. Just quickly paste the Windows, an 1703, so this is quite old. But it'll work. This is really old, but who cares? So while waiting on that, let's actually work out how we're going to attach that image. So can we go, is there an ISO? So we can actually set the, okay, we need CD. We actually need to configure the disk. Okay, so we can specify the boot device. So what we're going to do here is we're going to say the boot device is a CD is equal to CD. So we have that set up. And what we're going to do is I think we need to set the item. So if we say, whew, attach an image to a thing. That's interesting. Attach image. I'll say let's just go. I think let's just go set VM. Let's see what's in set VM. I don't think it's going to be set VM. I think it's going to be something else. But we can work with it. We can checkpoint types, all that kind of jazz. We don't really care. What we're looking for is, yeah, we do need to set a process account and dynamic memory. Oh, we need to set a process account and memory as well. Does this have a process account? Does new VM? Okay, so that's something we're going to need to do is we actually need to so we need to do that. So that's something that we're going to get. So we're just going to get VM. So now we should be able to just go set VM name, VM name. And then we're going to do. Sorry, I'm just kind of working with this while it's fresh in my memory. I'm just going to set static memory and process account. So essentially, we're going to say let's give it 4 cores. Static memory is 4 GB. Hopefully that works. Hang on, let's quickly have a quick look. Yep, that's fine. So we're going to give it 4 gigs of memory, and we're going to basically give it 4 cores, which is plenty for that. The next thing we need to do is we obviously need to attach the ISO to the VM. So this is actually something that I'm not entirely sure. So I'm going to go back to get command. I'm going to say boot. I'm just going to say get me everything to do with boot. It's going to be prefixed with VM. I know that. Set VM DVD drive. So that's going to be it there. So now we need to set the VM DVD drive. So we need to specify, let's have a look at what we actually need to do. So let's go back up here and have a look at what we actually need to do. Set configures the virtual DVD drive. Okay, sweet. Set VM. Okay, so we need to specify the VM and then we specify the path. Oh, that's super easy. That's super easy. So essentially what we can do here is we just can grab that and then we can go VM name. And then we can specify the path, and we can just go ahead and grab that copy, which is complete. Oh, I don't want to scan it with Sophos, no. We can then just go ahead and copy that, like so. Once we've completed that, we can start the VM, like so. So we can go start VM name, like so. So what I'm going to do here is splat all that in, like so. I'm just going to call it params like that. And we're going to basically actually, we're going to set the error action preference to stop. So any error, we're going to basically say we want to stop the code like so. So we can actually get rid of, we don't need any sort of custom parameters like error action on here. We can just basically say stop. We can actually configure that to debug too. So we can actually say if there's an error, we can just drop straight into the debugger. Actually, let's do that first. Let's actually configure it to debug. I think it's debug. It's being annoying with splatting. I think it's debug. Let's try debug. I think it's debug. Okay, so we can just say debug. All right, it's time to test it. Very, very basic code, but let's see what we get. So I'm just going to drop some breakpoints here because essentially I just want to be able to quickly step it over. We're already kind of pausing here already, and we're just going to start testing our code. So step number one is let's clear our screen and let's actually start debugging. So I'm going to add a quick configuration. Wait for this to finish downloading. Okay, that works. Let's go ahead and run it. Okay, so we need to enter our VM name. Let's firstly jump in Hyper-V and check what we have there. So I know we don't have a VM called test, so let's actually just quickly test that. We need a VM path. I'm just going to quickly give it a path. We're just going to go e/test. Disk size, let's give it 40 gigs. So it's going to be 40 GB. Okay, so we've hit our first breakpoint. Let's actually suss this out. So, okay, could not find virtual machine name test. That should be fine. So essentially, that doesn't look like it's going to work. So if we step, actually it did work. Fantastic. So let's just quickly validate that that's going to work for a machine that exists. So DC01, yes. Okay, cool. So it's not null. That's fine. So essentially, now we're going to test the path. I'm just going to quickly run this. Okay, that's false. That's all good. The path doesn't exist. Again, we don't really need to test that. That's fine. So this is the one we need to test, which is make sure that the path is valid. The path is not valid. So it actually needs the path to exist. So what we actually are going to do, so if we step in here, oh, actually, what? Oh, sorry, no, it's fine. The path is fine. So that's all good. Now we're setting our error action preference to debug. We're going to now go ahead and create our VM. So if we have a quick look at our parameters, sorry, I haven't actually finished declaring. It was stepped in. So I'm just going to press Shift F11 to step over. Oh, sorry, to step out, and I've just gone ahead and created it. Damn it. Hyper-V was unable to find a virtual machine with the name test. Okay. Hyper-V was unable to find a virtual machine. Okay. So we've completely didn't create a VM. We've created a path, I think. Yep, we got a path that didn't actually work. So let's try to create it, and something's not right. So essentially, we're just going to put a breakpoint there. We are going to give this another go. So we can remove these breakpoints. I'm just going to quickly clear the screen. We're going to go ahead and rerun it. So if we go, VM name is test, VM path is e/test, 40 GB. Cannot convert value debug, unable to identify. Okay. I thought it was debug. I thought there was an ability to debug. Suspend, break. I think it's break. It's break. It's not debug. It's break. So we're going to stop that. We're just going to put it to break. That's fine. So I'm just going to quickly clear the screen. We're going to rerun it. Test a/test 40 GB. Yep, that's fine. We need to. So we've gone ahead and created. I just want to have a quick look. So you can see here the switch name. We've got the VM switch information. We've got all that good stuff. So now we should be able to jump into Hyper-V here, and we should see a VM called test, maybe. Okay, the specify wildcard pattern is not valid. VM switch. Okay, so it doesn't like the switch. That's fine. So what we can do now is we can go back. I'm going to remove that directory. We're going to now just say the switch is external. It's not. Let's get rid of all that other jazz. It might not need it. So let's go ahead and rerun it. e/test 40 GB. So gonna remove this specific breakpoint. Let's go ahead and run it. Okay, so we've created the VM. There was no terminating errors. Oh, sorry, errors. So we can see there's our VM. Let's have a look at it. So we see it's the configuration is boot from the CD. We've got a VHD. We can actually jump into our VM. We can actually see there's our VHD and there's the VM info. So that's all there. Sweet. So that's our first part. So now we actually need to set the VM info. So we're going to change the processor count to 4 and the memory to 4. So let's test that. So now I'm just quickly going back into Hyper-V. We're going to have another quick look at it. You can see here it didn't do it. So that's interesting. Did it actually? Didn't even configure any of it. Maybe I need to refresh. Let's try now. No, didn't even configure it. I set the processor count to be 4. Ah, it's unable to find a virtual machine with the name test. Oh no, that's fine. So why didn't that work? VM name test. Set VM. This is fun. This is one of the things that drives me bonkers. Let's just try this. We're gonna just run this manually and see what happens. Test processor count 4 static memory. Value must be gradual. Okay, something's not right. That's fine. All right, let's just keep carrying on. We'll have a look at that later. So we can then set the DVD drive, and we should be able to see that configured, hopefully. Yep, so it's configured the DVD drive, so we can go ahead and start it. But before we start it, we need to fix that issue with the resources. So let's go ahead and stop it. We need to now actually remove the VM, so we go ahead and delete test. We need to go ahead and remove it from our VMs directory here. So let's go ahead and delete you. So now we've cleaned up. So this is the one thing that's not playing ball, is this specific one. It didn't throw a terminating error, which is weird. So we're gonna have a play with it. This is one of the cool things we can have play with it. So let's go ahead and rerun our code. Test VM path e/test. Disk size 40 GB. Yep, that's fine. Okay, so we've created the VM, all good. So now let's F11 that. F11 again. Okay, now I'm just going to go get VM name test. And then we're just going to have a look at all the data. So we're going to go get VM name test format list star. Let's see what we get. It's not deleted. Memory minimum, memory startup. What I'm looking for is the CPU count. Processor count. So it's actually not setting the processor count. That's interesting. All right, hang on. Let's just jump into Windows PowerShell and try it there. So if we go set VM name test processor count 4. So 4 static memory 4 GB. Okay. The positional parameter cannot. Interesting. Let's try this. Does that work? Okay, that works. Static memory. What does static memory need? So we're just going to have a look at now set VM. What was it? That static memory. Oh, it's a switch. That's why. Okay. So I need to set. That's what I need to use. So I need to say it's static memory and then memory startup bytes. Okay, so that's why it's not working. So we need to say memory that, and then we need to say this. Let's have a quick look at memory startup bytes. Let's have a quick squiz at it. Oh man, I don't want to have to thumb and write it in bytes. I'm just going to do this. I'm so lazy right now. To bytes. Thank you, that'll work. So we can just do that. We can then stop our code. We can then go ahead and delete and recreate. So I made a bit of a boo-boo there. I should have read the documentation. I'll go ahead and I've removed it. We can go ahead and delete it, like so. So it's gone. Let's go ahead and rerun it. So now if we rerun our code, VM name test test 40 GB. Yep, go ahead, run. Okay, sweet. So we've got memory startup bytes. Let's F11 that. Now let's check Hyper-V again. So we've got our VM. We should see 4 cores, 4 gig of memory. Perfect. Look at that. All right, so now we can keep carrying on. We can basically just go ahead, set the path, which we've just done, and now we started the VM. So if we jump in here now, there we go. We've got a VM that's running, and it's prompting for obviously going through the Windows install. So really cool win. That's actually a really good win. So now I'm just going to turn it off. I'm just going to turn it off. I don't want to and we can go ahead and delete it. So we don't need it anymore. So that's basically concludes today's lesson. So obviously you guys could see what I'm kind of doing, how I'm kind of getting to get to a solution in PowerShell, and obviously getting around PowerShell. So obviously this needs a lot more work, but it's actually a really good start. You can see you got it's quite intuitive. You can see that I was like, oh, I don't know exactly what it is, and obviously I'm just jumping on documentation. I'm looking at the documentation, all those different kinds of things. So I think that is a really good outcome for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. That definitely concludes today's session. So before we leave, does anyone have any questions? Start tidying up. Anybody have any questions? I'm going to quickly just paste again. I'm going to paste the links to the slides. 1 sec. I'm just going to do that now while I wait for questions. Notebook, PowerShell slide link. Just want to make sure this link still works. So yeah, I think okay, if there's no questions, it's all good. If you obviously need to ask questions, you can just reach out. Ask questions on Twitter. You can reach out through Discord. You can reach out on the PowerShell invite. Oh, sorry, the PowerShell Discord or Slack channel. So yeah, but I hope you guys enjoyed it. Obviously, you also through the BrizProg PowerShell group if you're part of that as well. But if I hope you guys enjoyed it. That was actually really good. We've actually finished dead on time, which is always great. We obviously in the last part of kind of just flying through pretty quickly, so I hope you guys could keep up. Yeah, so that's pretty much it for today. Next week, what do we have on next week? It's definitely kicking into the end of the year, so this is actually going to be, yeah, interesting. So what's next week? Okay, ooh, it's functions and advanced functions. Okay, so this is going to be, we are starting to now go into a little bit more of the advanced stuff within PowerShell. This is fairly exciting. Having an understanding of advanced functions is really useful. So you guys can obviously start writing your own functions and advanced functions. But yeah, so that's going to be next week. PowerShell advanced functions and functions. The last one, which I think is configuration is code. I don't know if we're going to be able to teach that, so I think we're going to probably just go into PS Cones. And we're just going to mess around in that for the lesson, and we're going to go through all the different challenges within that and basically solve them. So, but that's pretty much it for today. So I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, obviously, don't need to mention anything else because it's kind of annoying. Obviously, do all those kinds of things, follow me or whatever. Yeah, we'll be doing this. We'll be back next week, smashing it out. We'll be doing some functions and advanced functions. Obviously, logging, testing, and those kinds of things will be happening after that. And that will conclude this course. And hopefully, you guys kind of took a lot away from it, and then you guys can start applying it. And I hope you guys right now are actually starting to apply the code that I'm testing, so that you're applying what you've learned already, so that obviously it helps you guys out. So anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed it. I am going to be back next Tuesday. Last Tuesday, I just couldn't be bothered streaming. I was just too tired, and I was like, nah, I just can't be bothered. So next Tuesday, I am going to be back. We are going to be refactoring the PowerShell, the function that I wrote for Azure Application Insights, logging to Application Insights. We're going to be rewriting that for a new module. So essentially, that's what's going to be happening next Tuesday. Hope you see you guys there. Obviously, it's going to just be me writing code and chatting. It's obviously not going to be any sort of formal teaching. So, yeah, hope to see you guys there. But yeah, like I said, anyway, hopefully see you next one. Take care, guys. See ya.